It's scarcely believable just how out of touch our two main parties could be. Just look at this X from the Labour Party. If they're so sure they're winning, why are they spending time having a go at Nigel Farage? What would be the point? Well, unless they're not really so sure that they're winning after all. Under the word fact there, they have Nigel Farage wants to get rid of the NHS as we know it. And they're not even thinking that someone who's just come back from a 10-hour wait in an overcrowded A&E to get a cut finger sewn up, or who spent half the night standing in a hospital corridor next to Granny groaning on a trolley because there's no room in a ward, what's that someone going to think on seeing a message that this NHS, as we know it, will get a change? Well, what do you think? I'm Granniopteryx. So, the Labour Party think this is a good message, do they? Well, it's probably just the ticket for the many Labour unions who are running or not running the NHS right now, because it's their antiquated 70-year-old practices that have run the health service into the buffers. Yes, they're going to hate the idea of change, aren't they? Which is sort of ironic, really, considering that the big message is that Labour is the party of change. And yet, when someone comes along with some sort of a plan for change, oh, big shock and horror, pearl clutching all round. And that's just the trans activists. Because if there's one thing everyone knows, it's that whatever they say, socialists just don't like change. They talk a lot about change. They talk about revolution. But if we really think about the word revolution, what it actually means is a wheel turning right back to where it's starting from. But if you're not employed by the NHS, then the prospect of change would be for most of us a blessed relief. As for this poster, it's a sign of real desperation, you know, because usually political parties don't name their opponents. They don't put opponents' faces up on hoardings or in advertising material. They don't put opponents' names on hoardings or in advertising material because they don't want the names and the faces of the other side to be driven into people's minds. Usually, political parties are astonishingly reticent about such things, even negatively. The Conservatives made that mistake in the 2005 election with the Tony Blair Devil Eyes posters. I'll find a copy and I'll put it up there. As it turns out, it was quite correct. But no one was to know that, well, hardly anyone was to know that at the time, and people didn't like it. You know what? I think the Labour Party isn't as much of a shoo-in as everyone likes to say. I think they've been doing their own polling and have found a few gaps. And moving on to the Tories, what do they have to offer? Here's the poster. Clear plan, bold action, secure future. Yeah. Does anyone actually believe that? I doubt it. They've been in government since 2010, and what they should have been doing is reversing all the junk laws passed by the Labour Party, those ridiculous bolt-ons like the Supreme Court, and the awful hate speech laws. They should have done that in their first term. Then, after that, they could have effectively taken us out of the EU instead of messing around with a lot of sort of halfway nonsense. And perhaps, of late, they could have got us out of the ECHR as well and come to grips with the migration problem. Instead, they spent the past 15 years doing... Well, actually, I'm not exactly sure what they've been doing. But whatever it is, I haven't seen either a plan, any action, and now I'm not too sure about the future either. So much for that poster. No one is. Just contrast that with the Reform Party. And it's not like I have a big brief for Reform Party. I keep saying I don't like the way they're thinking of messing around with the voting system. But just look what they did when they realised they weren't making much headway. Farage took over. Tice, who seems to be a competent businessman but has the charisma of a bowl of boiled rice, he just stepped aside. Did you notice that? No party shenanigans, no ego, no speeches. He's a businessman. He saw what had to be done and he did it. I'd like to see something like that happening with one of the other lot. The party grandees there on both sides hang on to their posts like zombies grabbing at the edge of the grave while their opponents are trying to bury them. The other thing Reform did was in the last election. Does anyone remember how they stood aside for the Conservatives so as not to split the vote when Corbyn seemed to be ready to take over the country? Again, they were acting for the good of the country and not for political ego. Now, there's a thought. If the Conservatives just got out of the mindset of staying in power, whatever, and reached an agreement with Reform about which party stands for which seats so they don't get in each other's way, a coalition of them might actually be able to outnumber Labour and possibly form a government. But I have a horrible feeling that what's going to happen is that the Conservatives will end up being forever remembered as the party that pulled the plug on the boat, preferring to let it sink because they didn't get to hold the steering wheel. Okay, till next time. You can help my channel by clicking like, by subscribing, by clicking the notification bell, and by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels are in the description, also links to donation sites, but really the best way you can help me is simply by clicking like. Thank you.